The sound cut through Union Station like a knife through glass. A baby's scream so raw, so desperate, that even the rush-hour crowd began to slow their steps. Victoria Manning stood frozen beside the information board, her Hermès bag slipping from her shoulder as she stared down at the infant carrier in her trembling hands. Inside, 3-month-old Emma writhed in fury, her tiny fists clenched, face purple with rage. "Please," Victoria whispered, her voice barely audible over the wailing. "Please, sweetheart, just stop." But Emma only screamed louder, the sound echoing off the marble walls like an accusation. People were staring now. A businessman in a $1,000 suit shook his head in disgust. A teenage girl pulled out her phone, filming. An elderly woman clicked her tongue and muttered something about rich people who can't even handle their own children. Victoria felt each glance like a physical blow. She had commanded boardrooms filled with Fortune 500 executives. She had negotiated billion-dollar mergers without breaking a sweat. But this tiny human being had reduced her to helpless panic. Emma had been crying for 3 hours straight. Through the taxi ride from the penthouse, through the emergency pediatrician visit that found nothing wrong, through every desperate attempt at feeding, changing, rocking, shushing. The nanny had quit that morning, the third one in 6 weeks, leaving only a terse note about impossible working conditions and a baby who seemed to hate the world. Victoria's hand shook as she tried once more to lift Emma from the carrier. The baby's cries intensified, so piercing that a security guard started walking their direction. Panic rose in Victoria's chest. She couldn't even comfort her own daughter. What kind of mother was she? What kind of person? Then, cutting through the chaos like sunlight through storm clouds, came a voice. Deep, gentle, singing words she couldn't quite make out over Emma's screams. Victoria's head snapped up, searching the crowd for the source. That's when she saw him. A man in paint-splattered work clothes, tool belt hanging from his waist, holding the hand of a small boy with the same dark eyes. The stranger was singing softly, his voice carrying an old lullaby Victoria hadn't heard since her own childhood. And impossibly, incredibly, Emma's cries began to soften. Victoria stared in wonder as her daughter, her impossible, inconsolable daughter, gradually quieted in the arms of a complete stranger whose calloused hands held her with more tenderness than Victoria had managed in 3 months of trying. She had no idea that the man now cradling her baby had once been the most sought-after pediatric nurse in the city. She didn't know his name was Marcus Rivera, or that he had lost everything, his career, his wife, his home, because of a lie told by someone exactly like her. And she certainly didn't know that in 60 seconds when Emma finally fell asleep against Marcus's chest with a contented sigh, her entire world would begin to unravel in ways that would force her to question everything she thought she knew about power, privilege, and what it really meant to care for another human being. If you're enjoying this story so far, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe. Drop a comment telling me where in the world you're watching from. I love hearing from you. The afternoon light slanted through the massive windows of Union Station, casting long golden rectangles across the polished floor. Victoria Manning had been standing in the same spot for nearly 20 minutes, watching in stunned silence as Marcus Rivera held her daughter. Emma slept peacefully against his chest, one tiny fist curled around the fabric of his work shirt, her breathing finally steady and calm. Victoria didn't know what to say. In her world of corporate acquisitions and hostile takeovers, she always had the right words, the perfect strategy, the winning move. But here, in this moment, she was completely powerless. A billionaire brought to her knees by a 3-month-old baby and a stranger's inexplicable gift. "How did you—" she began, then stopped, her voice catching. Marcus looked up from Emma's sleeping face. His eyes were kind but tired, the kind of exhaustion that came from years of carrying weight that wasn't entirely his own. "She just needed someone to listen," he said quietly. "Babies cry for a reason. Sometimes it's not what they need, it's who they need." Victoria felt something twist in her chest. "I've tried everything. 3 nannies, 2 pediatricians, every baby book ever written. She hates me." "She doesn't hate you," Marcus said, his voice gentle but certain. "She's scared. Babies can feel when the people caring for them are scared too." The words hit Victoria like a physical blow because they were true. She had been terrified from the moment Emma was born, terrified of doing something wrong, of proving what she'd always suspected deep down, that success in business meant nothing when it came to the things that actually mattered. "I don't know how to be a mother," Victoria admitted, the words escaping before she could stop them. She never showed vulnerability, never admitted weakness, but something about this man's presence made pretending feel impossible. Marcus studied her face for a long moment. "Can I ask you something?" When she nodded, he continued, "When's the last time you held her? Really held her, not just to hand her off to someone else?" Victoria's throat tightened. She always cries when I hold her. She's better with the nannies, with other people. I just make it worse." "May I?" Marcus gestured toward her with Emma still sleeping in his arms. Victoria hesitated, then stepped closer. Marcus moved slowly, carefully transferring Emma to her mother's arms. For a moment Victoria held her breath, waiting for the screaming to start again. But Emma simply settled against her chest with a soft sigh, staying asleep. "See," Marcus said softly, "she knows you. She's been waiting for you to believe you could do this." Victoria looked down at her daughter's peaceful face, feeling tears she hadn't allowed herself to shed in months. "I run a company worth $2 billion, she whispered. "I employ thousands of people, and I can't figure out how to take care of one tiny person." "Different skills," Marcus said. "Money and power don't teach you how to love. That's something you have to learn by doing it." A small voice piped up from beside them. "Dad, can we go now? The train's coming soon." Victoria looked down and saw Marcus's son for the first time, maybe 5 years old, with serious dark eyes and a worn backpack that looked like it had seen better days. He tugged on his father's paint-stained sleeve with the patient insistence of a child who had learned not to ask twice for anything. "Of course, mijo," Marcus said, ruffling the boy's hair. "Just helping this lady with her baby." Victoria felt reality crash back around her. This man had a life, responsibilities, places to be. He wasn't some magical solution to her problems. He was a stranger who had shown her a moment of kindness, nothing more. "I should let you go," she said quickly. "Thank you for—" "I don't know how to thank you." Marcus smiled, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. "Just remember what I said. She doesn't need you to be perfect. She just needs you to be present." He shouldered his tool bag and took his son's hand. Victoria watched them walk toward the departure board, Marcus's work boots echoing on the marble floor. Something about the way he moved, the careful way he guided his son through the crowd, made her chest ache with a longing she couldn't name. "Wait," she called out, surprising herself. Marcus turned back, eyebrows raised. "I'm Victoria, Victoria Manning, and this is Emma." "Marcus Rivera," he replied. "And this is my son, Diego." Victoria knew she should let them go, return to her world of board meetings and conference calls and problems that could be solved with money. But Emma was still sleeping peacefully in her arms, and for the first time in months, Victoria felt like maybe, just maybe, she might figure out how to be the mother her daughter needed. She had no idea that Marcus Rivera had once been the head pediatric nurse at Children's Hospital of Philadelphia. She didn't know that his gentle way with babies came from years of caring for the sickest, most vulnerable children in the city, and she certainly couldn't have guessed that his current job as a construction worker, the paint-stained clothes, the tool belt, the calloused hands, was the only work he could find after Victoria's own company had destroyed his career with a lawsuit so vicious and so unfair that it had cost him everything he'd ever worked for. In 3 days, Victoria would discover the truth about Marcus Rivera. She would learn that the man who had saved her sanity in Union Station was the same man her legal team had systematically destroyed 2 years ago. And when that moment came, she would have to choose between the empire she had built and the only person who had ever shown her what it meant to truly care for someone else. But for now, in the golden afternoon light of Union Station, Victoria Manning held her sleeping daughter and watched Marcus Rivera walk away, completely unaware that their lives were about to collide in ways that would change everything both of them thought they knew about justice, forgiveness, and the price of power. The silence in the taxi felt different this time, not the oppressive weight of Emma's screaming, but something softer, the quiet of a sleeping baby and a mother who was finally beginning to breathe again. Victoria stared down at her daughter's face, still hardly believing that the same child who had been inconsolable an hour ago was now resting peacefully in her arms. The driver glanced in the rearview mirror. "First time she's been quiet all day, huh?" Victoria nodded, not trusting her voice. She couldn't stop thinking about Marcus Rivera's words. "She just needs you to be present." Such a simple concept, yet one that felt impossibly foreign in her world of constant motion, endless meetings, and problems solved with money rather than time. When they pulled up to her building on Rittenhouse Square, Victoria tipped the driver generously and carefully carried Emma through the marble lobby. The doorman, James, smiled broadly, the first genuine smile she'd seen from him in weeks. "She looks peaceful, Ms. Manning," he said softly. "You both do." Inside the penthouse, Victoria moved through rooms that suddenly felt too large, too empty, too perfectly arranged. Everything in her life was designed for efficiency, for image, for success. But none of it was designed for the messy, unpredictable reality of caring for another human being. She settled into the armchair by the window, still holding Emma, afraid that putting her down might break whatever spell Marcus had cast. The late afternoon sun painted the room in warm gold, and for the first time since becoming a mother, Victoria simply sat still. Her phone buzzed, text messages from her assistant about tomorrow's board meeting, emails about the Henderson acquisition, a reminder about the charity gala next week, the machinery of her empire demanding her attention, as it always did. But Victoria turned the phone face down and kept holding her daughter. That night, Emma slept for 6 straight hours, the longest stretch since she'd been born. Victoria woke in a panic, certain something was wrong, but found the baby sleeping peacefully in the crib beside her bed. As she watched Emma's tiny chest rise and fall, Victoria realized she couldn't remember the last time she'd felt this rested, this calm. But with the morning came reality. Victoria had to return to work, and Emma needed care. The agency was sending another nanny, the 4th in 2 months. And Victoria felt her anxiety spike at the thought of handing her daughter over to yet another stranger. The new nanny arrived at 8 sharp. Patricia Chen was older than the others, maybe 50, with kind eyes and steady hands. She came highly recommended, with references from some of the city's most prominent families. But when she reached for Emma, the baby's face immediately scrunched in preparation for tears. "Wait," Victoria said, surprising herself. "Let me try something." She lifted Emma from the carrier and held her close, the way Marcus had shown her, not like she was handling something fragile that might break, but like she was comforting someone who needed her. Emma fussed for a moment, then settled against her mother's chest. Patricia raised an eyebrow, impressed. "She knows you now," the nanny said. "Yesterday was different." "Yesterday was hell," Victoria admitted, "but someone helped us. A stranger at the train station who knew exactly what to do." As Victoria prepared to leave for the office, she found herself thinking about Marcus Rivera again. Something about him had stayed with her, not just his ability to calm Emma, but the sadness in his eyes, the careful way he'd guided his son through the crowd. There had been a story there, pain beneath the kindness. At her office on the 30th floor of the Manning Financial Tower, Victoria tried to focus on the Henderson acquisition. Manning Financial specialized in distressed asset recovery, buying struggling companies, streamlining operations, and selling them for profit. It was ruthlessly efficient and enormously profitable. But today, the whole enterprise felt hollow. Her assistant, Rebecca, knocked and entered with coffee and a stack of documents. "The Henderson files are ready for your review," she said. "Legal wants to discuss the liability clauses, and there's been some pushback from their employees' union." Victoria nodded absently, signing papers without really reading them. Her mind kept drifting to Emma, to Marcus, to the strange feeling that something fundamental had shifted in her world. "Miss Manning," Rebecca's voice held a note of concern. "Are you all right? You seem distracted." "I'm fine," Victoria said automatically, then paused. "Rebecca, do you have children?" The question clearly surprised her assistant. In 5 years of working together, Victoria had never asked anything personal. "2 daughters," Rebecca said cautiously, 8 and 10. "Was it hard when they were babies?" Rebecca's expression softened. "The hardest thing I've ever done, and the most important." Victoria nodded, feeling something ease in her chest. She wasn't the only one who had struggled. She wasn't uniquely broken. At lunch, instead of eating at her desk as usual, Victoria found herself walking the 12 blocks home. She told herself it was to check on Emma, but really she just needed to see her daughter, to hold her, to prove to herself that yesterday hadn't been a fluke. Patricia met her at the door with a smile. "She's been an angel all morning. Ate well, played a little, napped for 2 hours. Whatever you did yesterday, it worked." Victoria found Emma awake in her bouncy seat, looking around with alert, curious eyes. When she saw her mother, she didn't cry. Instead, she made a soft, cooing sound and reached up with tiny fingers. "Hello, sweetheart," Victoria whispered, lifting her daughter. "Did you miss me?" Emma gurgled and grabbed a handful of Victoria's hair, holding on tight. Victoria laughed, actually laughed, for the first time in months. That afternoon at the office passed differently. Victoria found herself thinking about Emma's smile, about the weight of her daughter in her arms. When Rebecca brought in reports about the Henderson acquisition, Victoria read them more carefully. Henderson Manufacturing employed 300 people in South Philadelphia. The company made medical supplies, nothing glamorous but essential equipment for hospitals and clinics. They'd been struggling since their founder died, and his inexperienced son took over. Manning Financial's standard approach would be to fire half the workforce, sell the equipment, and liquidate the assets. But as Victoria read through the employee files, she saw names and faces instead of just numbers. Maria Santos, single mother of 3, 22 years with the company. James Wright, diabetic, needed the health insurance. Dozens of families who would be destroyed if she followed her usual playbook. Her phone rang. "Victoria, it's Charles." Charles Manning, her father, calling from his retirement home in Connecticut. "How's my granddaughter?" "She's..." Victoria paused, thinking of Emma's morning smile. "She's wonderful, Dad. Really wonderful." "You sound different," Charles observed. "Happier." Victoria was quiet for a moment. "I think I'm learning how to be her mother." "Good," Charles said firmly. Business will always be there, Victoria, but babies don't stay babies forever. Don't miss it. After the call, Victoria sat looking out at the city skyline. Somewhere down there, Marcus Rivera was working construction, going about his life, completely unaware of the impact he'd had on hers. She wondered about his story, about his son, about what had brought them to Union Station on a Tuesday afternoon. She had no way of knowing that Marcus was currently installing drywall in a medical clinic, using skills he'd learned during his years as a nurse. She didn't know that he'd been fired from Children's Hospital after Manning Financial acquired their parent company and decided his salary was too expensive. She couldn't have guessed that the cost-cutting measures her company had implemented had destroyed not just his career, but his marriage, his home, and his faith in the system he'd once served. All Victoria knew was that a stranger had shown her daughter the tenderness she'd been too afraid to offer herself. And for the first time in her life, she wanted to understand what it meant to give something back, to be the kind of person who helped rather than took, who built up rather than tore down. Tomorrow she would make a decision about Henderson Manufacturing that would surprise everyone, including herself. In a week she would start asking questions about company policies that had never concerned her before. And in 3 days, when she learned the truth about Marcus Rivera, Victoria Manning would face the first real moral choice of her privileged life. But tonight she would go home early for the first time in years. She would send Patricia home with pay for a full day and spend the evening learning how to give her daughter a bath, how to read her cues, how to be present in the moment instead of always planning for the next one. Emma would fall asleep in her arms again, and Victoria would finally understand what Marcus had been trying to tell her. Love wasn't about having all the answers. It was about showing up and trying, even when you were scared, even when you didn't know what you were doing, especially then. 3 days passed before Victoria saw Marcus Rivera again. 3 days during which Emma continued to sleep peacefully through the nights and smile during the days, as if that moment in Union Station had reset something fundamental between mother and daughter. 3 days during which Victoria found herself thinking about Marcus's gentle hands and tired eyes more than she cared to admit. It was Friday afternoon when she decided to return to Union Station. She told herself it was because Emma loved watching the trains, but the truth was simpler and more complicated. She wanted to see him again. She wanted to understand how a stranger in work clothes had accomplished what teams of expensive nannies and pediatric specialists could not. Victoria pushed Emma's stroller through the crowds, scanning faces for Marcus's familiar features. The station bustled with weekend travelers and commuters, heading home early, but there was no sign of the man who had changed everything with a single lullaby. She was about to give up when she heard it, that same gentle voice, singing softly near the food court. Victoria followed the sound and found Marcus sitting at a small table with Diego, sharing what looked like their only meal of the day, a single sandwich split between them and 2 cups of water. Marcus looked up as she approached, surprise flickering across his face. Victoria and Emma. His smile was genuine but cautious. "How has she been?" "Better," Victoria said, settling into the chair across from them. "So much better. I don't know what you did, but it worked." Diego looked up from his half of the sandwich, studying Victoria with serious eyes. "Are you rich?" he asked with the blunt honesty of a 5-year-old. "Diego," Marcus said quietly, but Victoria held up a hand. "Yes," she told the boy. "I am. Why do you ask?" "You smell like the ladies who used to visit Dad at work," Diego said, matter-of-factly. Before the bad people made him leave, Victoria felt something cold settle in her stomach. "What kind of work did you do?" she asked Marcus, though part of her already dreaded the answer. Marcus was quiet for a long moment. his fingers tracing the rim of his water cup. "I was a pediatric nurse," he said finally, "at Children's Hospital for 8 years. The cold feeling spread through Victoria's chest. "What happened?" "The hospital got bought out," Marcus said, his voice carefully neutral. "New management decided experienced nurses were too expensive. They could hire 3 new graduates for what they paid me." Victoria's throat felt tight. Manning Financial had acquired the healthcare group that owned Children's Hospital 18 months ago. She remembered the acquisition. It had been particularly profitable because they'd streamlined operations so efficiently. "Which company?" she asked, though she already knew. Marcus met her eyes. "Manning Financial." The words hung in the air between them like a confession. Victoria felt the world tilt sideways, reality rearranging itself into something sharp and cruel. The man who had saved her sanity, who had shown her how to mother her own child, had been destroyed by her company, by her decisions, by her. "I should go," Marcus said, starting to stand. "No." Victoria's voice came out sharper than she intended. "Please, don't go." Diego tugged on his father's sleeve. "Dad, why does the lady look sad now?" Marcus sat back down slowly, his expression unreadable. "Sometimes grown-ups have complicated feelings about things, mijo." Victoria stared at her hands, Emma sleeping peacefully in the stroller beside her. "I remember that acquisition," she said quietly. "We cut staffing costs by 40%. The board was thrilled with the efficiency improvements." "Efficiency," Marcus repeated, the word bitter on his tongue. "That's what they called it when they fired nurses with decades of experience so they could save money." "You must hate me," Victoria whispered. Marcus was quiet for so long that Victoria finally looked up. His expression was sad, but not angry. "I don't hate you," he said finally. "I don't think you even knew my name when you made those decisions." The words cut deeper than hatred would have. "You're right," Victoria admitted. "I didn't know your name. I didn't know anyone's name. You were just numbers on a spreadsheet to me." Emma stirred in her stroller, making soft baby sounds. Without thinking, Marcus reached over and gently rocked the stroller, his movements automatic and practiced. Emma settled back into sleep. "You're good with children," Victoria observed. "It must have been hard to lose that work." "I loved my job," Marcus said simply. "Every day I got to help kids feel better. I got to comfort scared parents, teach new mothers how to care for their babies. It wasn't just work. It was who I was." Victoria felt tears threatening. "What do you do now?" "Construction, drywall mostly. It's honest work, but—" He trailed off, looking at Diego. "The pay isn't the same. The hours aren't the same. And I don't get to help people anymore." "Is that why you were at the station on Tuesday? Construction job?" Marcus nodded. "Working on a medical clinic downtown. The irony isn't lost on me. I'm installing walls in a place where I used to save lives." Victoria watched Diego finish his half of the sandwich with careful, practiced bites, the way children eat when food is precious and uncertain. "I'm sorry," she said. "I know that doesn't fix anything, but I'm truly sorry." "Sorry doesn't pay rent," Marcus said, but his tone wasn't cruel, just tired. "Sorry doesn't get Diego the things he needs. Sorry doesn't give me back 8 years of patient relationships and professional respect." "What if I could do more than apologize?" Victoria asked impulsively. "What if I could fix this?" Marcus's expression hardened. "I don't want your charity." "It wouldn't be charity. It would be justice." "Justice would have been not destroying my career in the first place," Marcus said. "What you're talking about now is guilt money." Emma began to fuss, and again Marcus automatically reached over to soothe her. Victoria watched his hands, gentle, skilled, instinctively knowing what the baby needed, These were the hands her company had deemed too expensive to keep. "Why did you help me that day?" Victoria asked. "When Emma was crying, when you had no idea who I was, why did you stop?" Marcus smiled for the first time since she'd mentioned Manning Financial. "Because that's what you do when someone needs help. You help them. Even when helping costs you something? Especially then." Victoria felt something crack open in her chest. She had built her entire life around the opposite principle, that every interaction was transactional, that kindness was weakness, that helping others was just another way of losing. "I want to learn," she said quietly. "I want to learn how to be the kind of person who helps instead of takes." Marcus studied her face. "That's not something you learn in business school." "Then teach me," Victoria said. "Show me what it looks like to care about people instead of profits." "Why?" Marcus asked. "What do you get out of it?" Victoria looked down at Emma, sleeping peacefully in her stroller. "Maybe I get to become the kind of mother my daughter deserves. Maybe I get to look in the mirror and like what I see." Diego had been listening to the conversation with the focused attention children bring to adult mysteries. Now he spoke up. "Dad, she seems nice, and her baby likes you." Marcus laughed, a sound with more sadness than humor in it. "Out of the mouths of babes." "Will you at least think about it?" Victoria asked. "Not about taking money from me, but about letting me try to make things right?" Marcus gathered up their empty sandwich wrapper and stood. "I think about a lot of things these days," he said. "Most of them keep me awake at night." He shouldered his small backpack and took Diego's hand. "Come on, mijo. We need to catch the bus home." Victoria watched them walk away again, this time knowing exactly who they were and what her company had taken from them. The knowledge sat in her stomach like a stone, heavy and cold and impossible to ignore. That evening, Victoria called an emergency meeting with her senior staff. Rebecca, her legal team, and the executives who had handled the children's hospital acquisition sat around the mahogany conference table in her office, looking confused and slightly annoyed at being summoned on a Friday night. "I want to review the children's hospital staffing decisions," Victoria announced without preamble. Charles Whitman, her head of acquisitions, looked puzzled. "That was 18 months ago. The integration was very successful. We exceeded all our cost reduction targets." "How many experienced nurses did we terminate?" "I'd have to pull the exact numbers, but it was significant. We replaced most of the senior staff with new graduates, much more cost-effective." Victoria felt sick. "What happened to the nurses we fired?" "I'm sorry?" Whitman looked even more confused. "I don't understand the question." "After we terminated them, where did they go? Were they able to find comparable positions?" Whitman exchanged glances with the legal team. "Ms. Manning, we don't typically track post-employment outcomes. That would be outside the scope of our responsibilities." "I want you to track them now," Victoria said. "All of them. I want to know where they ended up, what they're doing now, whether they were able to find work in their field." Rebecca leaned forward. "Victoria, may I ask what prompted this inquiry?" Victoria was quiet for a moment. How could she explain that a stranger's kindness had shown her the human cost of her business decisions? How could she tell them that she'd spent 3 days researching Marcus Rivera and learned that her efficiency improvements had destroyed not just his career, but his marriage, his home, and his ability to support his son? "I've been thinking about corporate responsibility," she said finally, "about the impact our decisions have on real people's lives." Whitman looked uncomfortable. "With respect, Ms. Manning, if we start second-guessing every staffing decision based on personal hardship stories, we'll lose our competitive advantage entirely." "Maybe our competitive advantage is the problem," Victoria said quietly. The room fell silent. These people had worked with her for years, had seen her make ruthless decisions without a moment's hesitation. This was new territory, and they clearly didn't know how to navigate it. "I want that report on my desk Monday morning," Victoria said. "Full accounting of what happened to every nurse we terminated. And I want recommendations for how we might address any ongoing hardships our decisions created." After the meeting, Victoria sat alone in her office, city lights twinkling below her. Emma was home with Patricia, probably being rocked to sleep with the same gentle motion Marcus had used at the train station. The irony wasn't lost on her. The man she'd destroyed was the one who had saved her relationship with her own daughter. Her computer chimed with an email, a response to one of the dozen inquiries she'd sent out that afternoon, trying to learn more about Marcus Rivera's professional background. The note was from Dr. Sarah Chen, former head of pediatrics at Children's Hospital. "Ms. Manning, you asked about Marcus Rivera. I can tell you without hesitation that he was one of the finest pediatric nurses I ever worked with. Patients and families specifically requested him. His knowledge of child development and pain management was exceptional. The hospital's patient satisfaction scores dropped significantly after he was terminated. I was told the decision to let him go was purely financial, part of the new ownership's cost-cutting measures. It was one of several decisions that led me to resign my own position. If you're considering him for a role at your organization, you would be fortunate to have him." Dr. Sarah Chen, current pediatric consulting private practice, former head of pediatrics, Children's Hospital of Philadelphia. Victoria read the email 3 times, each pass making the knot in her stomach tighter. Marcus Rivera hadn't just been a good nurse, he'd been an exceptional one, the kind of employee any organization would be lucky to have, and she'd destroyed his career to save money she didn't even need. She stayed in the office until nearly midnight, reading through acquisition reports and financial statements, seeing them with new eyes. Every efficiency improvement represented someone like Marcus. Every cost reduction meant a family struggling to pay rent, to afford health care, to maintain their dignity. When she finally went home, Victoria found Patricia reading in the living room, Emma sleeping peacefully in her crib. "How was she?" Victoria asked. "Perfect," Patricia smiled. "She's been so much calmer these past few days. Whatever you're doing differently, it's working." Victoria nodded, thinking of Marcus's hands gently rocking the stroller, his voice singing that old lullaby. Everything good in her life lately seemed to trace back to a man whose life she'd casually destroyed. That night she lay awake thinking about justice and guilt about the difference between charity and making amends. Marcus had said he didn't want her money, but what if she could offer something more valuable? What if she could give him back not just his job, but his purpose? By morning, Victoria had made a decision that would either begin to heal the damage she'd caused or confirm every cynical thing Marcus Rivera believed about people like her. She was going to offer him something no amount of money could buy, the chance to help build something better. The question was whether he would trust her enough to try. If you're hooked on this story, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss an upload. Your support means everything and helps me bring you more emotional stories like this one. Victoria spent Saturday morning in her office, even though she'd promised herself she would take weekends off to be with Emma. But this couldn't wait. She had calls to make, research to do, a plan to develop that went beyond simple guilt and moved toward something that might actually matter. The report from Charles Whitman arrived in her email at 9 a.m., exactly as requested. 43 experienced nurses terminated from Children's Hospital. Of those, only 18 had found comparable positions in pediatric care. 15 were working in adult medicine at reduced salaries. 6 had left nursing entirely. 4 were unemployed. And Marcus Rivera was installing drywall. Victoria printed every page, spread them across her conference table, and began to understand the true scope of what her company had done. These weren't just numbers, they were careers, families, vocations destroyed for the sake of quarterly earnings. Her phone rang, Rebecca calling from home. "I've been thinking about yesterday's meeting," her assistant said. "The nurse inquiry? Victoria, what's really going on?" Victoria was quiet for a moment. Rebecca had worked with her for 5 years, had seen her make hundreds of difficult business decisions without a backward glance. This sudden interest in corporate responsibility must seem completely out of character. "I met someone," Victoria said finally, "someone whose life we destroyed, and he showed me kindness anyway." "Oh," Rebecca was silent for a moment. "That must be difficult." "It's complicated," Victoria admitted. "I want to fix what we broke, but I don't know how to do it without making it worse." "Maybe start by asking him what he needs," Rebecca suggested, "instead of assuming you know what's best." After the call, Victoria sat staring at Marcus's file. 8 years at Children's Hospital, consistently excellent performance reviews, specialized training in pediatric pain management and family counseling, letters of recommendation from doctors, parents, fellow nurses, all describing him as exceptional, compassionate, irreplaceable. She had destroyed this man's career without knowing his name. Sunday afternoon, Victoria made a decision that would have seemed impossible a week earlier. She dressed Emma in her warmest clothes, packed a bag with bottles and diapers, and took the train to South Philadelphia. The address she'd found for Marcus was in a neighborhood she'd never visited, a world away from her penthouse in Rittenhouse Square. Row houses with narrow stoops, lined streets where children played between parked cars, and elderly people sat on lawn chairs watching the world go by. Marcus's building was a tired 3-story structure with peeling paint and a broken front step. Victoria climbed to the second floor, Emma's carrier heavy in her arms, and knocked on apartment 2B. Diego answered the door, his eyes widening in recognition. "Dad," he called over his shoulder, "the rich lady is here." Marcus appeared behind his son, surprise and wariness flickering across his face. He wore old jeans and a faded t-shirt, and Victoria could see the small apartment behind him, clean but sparse, furniture that had seen better days, a kitchen barely big enough for 2 people. "Victoria, what are you doing here?" "I wanted to see where you live," she said honestly. "I wanted to understand what my decisions cost you." Marcus stepped back, allowing her inside. The apartment was smaller than Victoria's walk-in closet, but it felt warm in a way her penthouse never had. Diego's drawings covered one wall, crayon pictures of superheroes and dinosaurs and a man in scrubs with a stethoscope around his neck. "Is that you?" Victoria asked, pointing to the drawing. "From before," Diego said proudly, "when Dad helped sick kids get better." Victoria felt her chest tighten. She set Emma's carrier on the small kitchen table and looked around the apartment that Marcus and Diego called home. No dishwasher, no central air, windows that didn't quite close properly, but the space was filled with love, photos of Diego at various ages, handmade birthday cards, books stacked carefully on improvised shelves. "It's not much," Marcus said, following her gaze. "It's beautiful," Victoria said, and meant it. "It's a real home." Emma began to fuss, and Marcus instinctively moved toward the carrier. Then he stopped himself, stepping back. "I should let you handle that." "No," Victoria said quickly. "Please, she likes you." Marcus lifted Emma from the carrier with practiced ease, and the baby immediately settled against his chest. Diego climbed onto a kitchen chair to get a better look. "She's pretty," the little boy said solemnly. "What's her name again?" Emma, Victoria said. She's 3 months old. I'm 5, Diego announced. Dad says when I'm bigger, I can help him take care of sick kids again. Victoria looked at Marcus. Is that what you want? To go back to nursing? Marcus nodded, his hand gently rubbing Emma's back. Every day, but it's not that simple. The termination is on my record. Other hospitals see that Manning Financial let me go. They assume there was cause. And even if someone would hire me, I'd have to start over at entry level. The pay wouldn't cover Diego's needs. What if that weren't true? Victoria said quietly. What if I could fix the record, provide references that told the truth about why you were terminated? Marcus's expression hardened. I told you I don't want charity. It's not charity, it's justice. It's correcting a lie that my company created. And what do you get out of it? Marcus asked. Absolution? The right to feel good about yourself again? Victoria was quiet for a moment, thinking about his question. What did she want from this? I want to be able to look my daughter in the eye when she's old enough to ask me what kind of person her mother was, she said finally. I want to tell her that when I realized I was wrong, I tried to make it right. Diego tugged on Marcus's shirt. Dad, what's absolution? It means being forgiven for something bad you did, Marcus explained gently. Did the lady do something bad? Marcus looked at Victoria for a long moment. Yes, mijo, but she's trying to fix it now. Emma had fallen asleep in Marcus's arms, and Victoria found herself studying his face as he held her daughter. The same gentleness he'd shown at the train station, the same instinctive knowledge of what a child needed. I've been thinking about what you said, Victoria told him, about learning to help instead of take. I want to start with you, but I want to do it right. What does that mean? It means I don't just want to get you your job back. I want to understand how to be better, how to make decisions that consider real people instead of just profit margins. Marcus shifted Emma to his shoulder, patting her back gently. You want me to teach you how to have a conscience? I want you to teach me how to use the one I apparently have, Victoria said. I want to learn what it means to care about the impact of my choices. Diego had been listening with the focused attention children bring to important adult conversations. Now he spoke up. Dad, maybe she could help you help kids again, and you could teach her how to be nice like you. Out of the mouths of babes, Victoria thought. What would you need? She asked Marcus. Not just for the job, but for everything. What would it take to really make this right? Marcus was quiet for so long that Victoria wondered if he would answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was careful, measured. I'd need my professional reputation restored. Clear documentation that the termination was financial, not performance-related. And I'd need a position that pays enough to support Diego properly. What else? What else? Marcus looked surprised. There has to be more. Your marriage ended because of the financial stress. Diego's had to move, change schools. What would it take to really rebuild what was lost? Marcus's expression softened slightly. Diego wants to take piano lessons. He's wanted to for 2 years, but we can't afford it. And he needs new clothes. He's growing so fast. And I'd like to put some money away for his college fund, something I haven't been able to do since I lost the hospital job. Victoria nodded, filing each item away. What about you? What do you need? I need to feel useful again, Marcus said quietly. I need to go to bed at night knowing I helped someone. That's what nursing gave me. Purpose. Construction pays the bills, but it doesn't feed my soul. Victoria felt something shift in her chest, a recognition of what had been missing from her own life. I don't think I've ever had that, she admitted. Work that fed my soul instead of just my bank account. What would that look like for you? Marcus asked. Victoria looked around the small apartment, at Diego's drawings on the wall, at her daughter sleeping peacefully in the arms of a man who had every reason to hate her, but had chosen kindness instead. "I think it would look like this," she said, "like using my resources to help instead of harm, like making decisions based on what's right instead of what's profitable." Marcus studied her face. "That's a nice sentiment. But sentiment doesn't change corporate culture. It doesn't prevent future Marcus Riveras from losing their jobs for the sake of quarterly earnings." "Then help me change the culture," Victoria said impulsively. "Don't just let me find you a job somewhere else. Help me transform Manning Financial into the kind of company that values people like you." Marcus laughed, but not with humor. "You want to change your entire corporate philosophy because you feel guilty about firing me?" "I want to change it because I finally understand what it costs," Victoria said, "and because I want my daughter to inherit something better than an empire built on other people's suffering." Diego climbed down from his chair and walked over to Victoria. Without warning, he climbed onto her lap, his small body warm and trusting. "I think you're sad," he said solemnly, "like Dad was when he lost his job helping kids." Victoria felt tears threatening. "I am sad, Diego. I'm sad that I hurt your dad without meaning to." "Did you say sorry?" "I did." Diego nodded gravely. "Dad says when you hurt someone, you have to say sorry and then try not to do it again." "That's very wise," Victoria said. "Your dad taught you well." "Will you try not to hurt people anymore?" Diego asked. Victoria looked at Marcus over his son's head. "I'm going to try very hard to do better," she promised, "but I'll need help learning how." Marcus sighed long and deep. "This is insane," he said quietly. "You're talking about completely restructuring a billion-dollar company. I'm talking about making it better, about using wealth and power to lift people up instead of tearing them down." "And you think I can teach you how to do that?" "I think you've already started," Victoria said. "Everything good that's happened in my life this week traces back to your kindness, to your willingness to help a stranger's crying baby, even though you had every reason to walk away." Emma stirred in Marcus's arms, making soft baby sounds. He rocked her gently, automatically, his movements born of years of caring for children. "If I said yes," Marcus said slowly, "if I agreed to help you with this crazy plan, what would that look like, practically speaking?" Victoria's heart leaped, but she kept her voice steady. "It would mean coming back to Manning Financial, not as a nurse, but as something new, director of employee welfare, maybe. Someone whose job is to ensure that our business decisions consider human impact, not just financial return." "You want to hire me to be your corporate conscience?" Marcus asked. "I want to hire you to help me build a company worthy of your respect," Victoria said. "A place where people like you, people with integrity and compassion, want to work." Marcus was quiet for a long moment, still holding Emma, still thinking. Diego had fallen asleep in Victoria's lap, his small body completely relaxed and trusting. "I'll need guarantees," Marcus said finally. "Real authority to challenge decisions, not just a figurehead position." "You'll have it. And I want to help redesign the acquisition process. No more mass layoffs without considering the human cost." "Done. And I want a commitment that Manning Financial will establish a retraining fund for employees displaced by future acquisitions. Real support, not just severance packages." Victoria nodded. "Whatever you think is right." Marcus looked at her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. "You realize this could cost your company millions? That shareholders might rebel when they see profit margins affected by employee welfare programs?" "Then I'll explain to them what I've learned," Victoria said. "That a company is only as strong as its people. That treating employees well isn't just morally right, it's good business. And if they don't buy it, if the board tries to remove you. Victoria looked down at Diego sleeping in her lap, then at her own daughter resting peacefully in Marcus's arms. Then I'll know I'm finally making decisions I can live with. Marcus smiled for the first time since she'd arrived at his apartment. Your daughter is lucky, he said. She's going to grow up with a mother who learned how to care about something more than money. She's going to grow up in a world that's a little better because of what you taught me, Victoria replied, that helping others isn't weakness, it's the whole point. Outside, the sun was setting over South Philadelphia, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. In the small apartment, 2 adults and 2 children sat in comfortable silence, making an unlikely family bound together by loss and forgiveness and the promise of something better. Tomorrow would bring challenges, board meetings and shareholder concerns, and the difficult work of changing a corporate culture built on profit above all else. But tonight, Victoria held a sleeping little boy who trusted her to do better, while Marcus held her daughter with the same gentle care he'd once brought to sick children in a hospital ward. For the first time in her life, Victoria understood what wealth was really for, not to insulate her from the world's pain, but to give her the power to heal it. The Monday morning board meeting was supposed to be routine. Victoria had called it to discuss the Henderson manufacturing acquisition, a straightforward presentation about asset optimization and profit projections. Instead, she was about to detonate her entire corporate philosophy in front of 12 of the most powerful business leaders in Philadelphia. Marcus arrived at Manning Financial at 7 a.m., 3 hours before the meeting, wearing the only suit he owned, a charcoal gray jacket Diego had helped him pick out at a discount store the day before. Rebecca met him in the lobby, her expression a mixture of excitement and terror. Ms. Manning is upstairs with legal, going over the presentation one more time, she told him, as they rode the elevator to the 30th floor. I have to warn you, this isn't going to be easy. Some of these board members have been with the company for decades. They're not fond of change. Marcus adjusted his tie, a nervous habit he'd developed overnight. Change is never easy, but sometimes it's necessary. The boardroom was exactly what Marcus had expected. Mahogany table, leather chairs, oil paintings of stern-faced men who'd built their fortunes on other people's labor. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city, making everyone inside feel like masters of the universe below. Victoria was already there, dressed in her usual armor of expensive fabric and perfect tailoring. But Marcus could see the tension in her shoulders, the way her fingers drummed silently against her portfolio. This was as terrifying for her as it was for him. The board members filed in promptly at 10. Marcus recognized several faces from business magazines, titans of industry who controlled billions in assets and thousands of jobs. Charles Whitman took his usual seat to Victoria's right, while the others arranged themselves around the table like generals preparing for war. Before we discuss Henderson manufacturing, Victoria began, her voice steady despite the magnitude of what she was about to propose, I'd like you to meet Marcus Rivera. Marcus is joining Manning Financial as our new Director of Employee Welfare and Corporate Responsibility. The silence that followed was deafening. Board members exchanged glances, eyebrows raised in confusion and concern. Robert Sterling, the longest-serving member, spoke first. Victoria, I don't recall approving any new executive positions. And what exactly is employee welfare? That sounds like HR territory. It's bigger than HR, Victoria replied. Marcus will be responsible for ensuring that our acquisition and restructuring decisions consider human impact alongside financial return. He'll help us build a more sustainable model of corporate growth. Whitman's jaw tightened. With respect, Victoria, we've been successful precisely because we don't let sentiment cloud our business judgment. The Henderson acquisition is a perfect example. By streamlining operations, we can increase profitability by 40%. By firing 300 people, Marcus said quietly. It was his first contribution to the conversation, and every head in the room turned toward him. Sterling's eyes narrowed. "I'm sorry, who are you exactly? What are your qualifications? For questioning our business strategy?" Marcus met his gaze steadily. "I'm someone who's been on the receiving end of your business strategy. I was a pediatric nurse at Children's Hospital when Manning Financial acquired the healthcare group. I was terminated along with 42 other experienced nurses to improve profit margins." The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Whitman's face had gone pale, while Sterling looked like he was about to have an aneurysm. "This is outrageous," Sterling said, turning to Victoria. "You've brought in some disgruntled former employee to lecture us about business ethics. This is exactly the kind of bleeding heart nonsense that destroys shareholder value." "Marcus Rivera was an exceptional nurse," Victoria said firmly. "His termination had nothing to do with performance and everything to do with cutting costs. We destroyed his career, his marriage, his ability to support his son, all to save money we didn't need." "That's business," Whitman said coldly. "If we started making decisions based on individual hardship stories, we'd be bankrupt within a year." "Would we?" Victoria asked. "Or would we be more successful because we actually cared about the quality of our workforce?" She opened her laptop and clicked through to a presentation she'd spent the weekend preparing. The first slide showed employee retention statistics for companies with strong welfare programs versus those without. "Companies that prioritize employee welfare have 30% lower turnover," she continued. "They have higher productivity, better customer satisfaction, and stronger long-term profitability. We've been so focused on short-term gains that we've ignored sustainable growth." Margaret Hayes, the only other woman on the board, leaned forward. "These are interesting statistics, Victoria, but they don't address the fundamental issue. Our shareholders expect consistent returns. They don't invest in Manning Financial to feel good about employee welfare. They invest because we deliver results," Victoria replied. "I'm proposing that we can deliver better results by changing how we define success." Marcus had been quiet during the exchange, but now he spoke up again. "May I share something?" When Victoria nodded, he continued. "At Children's Hospital, our pediatric unit had the highest patient satisfaction scores in the region. Parents specifically requested our nurses because they knew we cared about their children, not just about processing cases efficiently." He stood and walked to the windows, looking out at the city below. After Manning Financial took over, those scores plummeted. Patient complaints increased. 3 families filed malpractice suits because inexperienced nurses made critical errors. You saved money on salaries, but you lost millions in legal settlements and reputation damage. Sterling's face was red with anger. "You're talking about isolated incidents. I'm talking about the real cost of treating people like disposable assets," Marcus interrupted. "Every person you fire is someone's parent, someone's breadwinner, someone who deserves dignity and respect. When you destroy their lives to boost quarterly earnings, you're not just hurting them, you're damaging your own company's foundation." The room erupted in angry voices. Sterling and 2 other board members spoke over each other, demanding to know why Victoria had ambushed them with this socialist propaganda. Whitman was frantically checking his phone, probably calculating how this news would affect their stock price. Victoria raised her hand for silence. "I understand your concerns, but I'm not asking you to approve anything today. I'm asking you to consider a different approach to the Henderson acquisition." She clicked to the next slide, which showed a detailed restructuring plan that Marcus had helped her develop. Instead of mass layoffs, Manning Financial would invest in retraining programs, early retirement packages for employees who wanted them, and performance bonuses for those who stayed. This plan costs us an additional $12 million up front, Victoria explained, but it saves us the costs of recruitment, training, and the productivity loss that comes with high turnover. More importantly, it preserves the institutional knowledge and client relationships that make Henderson valuable in the first place. $12 million, Sterling repeated, his voice dripping with disgust. $12 million in pure charity, justified by feel-good statistics and emotional manipulation. It's an investment, Marcus said firmly. An investment in the human capital that actually creates value in your companies. The argument continued for another hour. Charts and statistics flew back and forth, but Marcus could see that the fundamental divide wasn't about numbers. It was about worldview. Half the board saw employees as costs to be minimized. Victoria and Marcus were trying to convince them that people were assets to be developed. Finally, Sterling called for a break. As board members filed out to make phone calls and plot strategy, Victoria slumped in her chair, exhausted. That went about as well as expected, she said quietly to Marcus. They're scared, Marcus observed. Change threatens their sense of control. Rebecca appeared in the doorway, her face pale. Victoria, I need to speak with you privately. They stepped into the hallway, and Rebecca's words came out in a rush. Sterling has been making calls. He's trying to organize a vote of no confidence. He thinks you've lost your mind, and he's convinced half the board that this employee welfare initiative will destroy the company. Victoria felt her stomach drop. She'd known this was a possibility, but hearing it made real was still a shock. How much support does he have? At least 6 votes, maybe 7. You need a majority to survive. Marcus had followed them into the hallway and caught the end of the conversation. I'm sorry, he said. I shouldn't have come. I've made this worse for you. No, Victoria said firmly. This was always going to be a fight. At least now I know where everyone stands. When the meeting reconvened, Sterling wasted no time. I'm calling for an emergency vote on Victoria's continued leadership of this company. She's shown a fundamental lack of judgment by proposing policies that prioritize employee welfare over shareholder returns. I second the motion, Whitman added quickly. Victoria stood at the head of the table, looking at faces she'd known for years, people she'd considered allies, friends even. Now she could see them calculating their own positions, weighing loyalty against profit. Before you vote, she said, I want to tell you about my daughter. The room fell silent. Victoria never talked about her personal life in business settings. Emma is 3 months old, Victoria continued. 3 weeks ago she cried constantly. I couldn't comfort her, couldn't figure out what she needed. I had every resource money could buy, the best pediatricians, the most expensive nannies, but nothing worked. She looked at Marcus, drawing strength from his steady presence. Then I met Marcus at a train station. He didn't know who I was, didn't know I could afford to pay him. He just saw a crying baby and a desperate mother, and he helped, not because of what he could get from me, but because it was the right thing to do. Victoria turned back to the board. That's when I realized something important. All our wealth, all our power. It means nothing if we don't use it to make the world better. Emma is going to grow up in the world we create. I want that world to be one where kindness matters more than quarterly earnings. Margaret Hayes spoke first when Victoria finished. That's a beautiful sentiment, Victoria, but we can't run a business on sentiment alone. We're not, Marcus said, stepping forward. We're proposing to run it on evidence. Every study shows that companies with engaged, well-treated employees outperform those that treat people as disposable. You want better returns? Start by treating your workforce like the valuable asset they are. The debate continued, but Marcus could see the lines hardening. Sterling's faction was convinced that any deviation from pure profit maximization was corporate suicide. Victoria's supporters, and there were fewer than Marcus had hoped, believed in the possibility of a different way. When the vote was finally called, the result was closer than expected. 7 votes for Sterling's no-confidence motion, 5 against. Victoria Manning was no longer CEO of her own company. The room cleared quickly after that, board members uncomfortable with the personal drama they'd just witnessed. Victoria sat alone at the mahogany table, staring out at the city that had once seemed like her kingdom. Marcus pulled up a chair beside her. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "This is my fault." "No," Victoria replied, her voice steady despite everything. "This was necessary. I needed to know who I really was and what I was willing to fight for." Rebecca appeared with a box of Victoria's personal items and a legal document. "They want you out of the building by end of business today," she said apologetically. "I'm supposed to escort you and Mr. Rivera to the lobby." As they rode the elevator down, Marcus felt the weight of what had just happened. Victoria had lost everything, her company, her position, her power, because she'd tried to do the right thing, because she'd believed in the possibility of change. "What will you do now?" he asked, as they stood in the marble lobby where this had all begun. Victoria was quiet for a moment, holding the box of her belongings. "I'm going to start over," she said finally. "I'm going to build something better." "With what?" "Sterling will make sure you're blacklisted from every major corporation in the country." Victoria smiled for the first time since the vote. "With the one thing they can't take away from me, my money." That evening, Victoria sat in her penthouse living room, Emma sleeping peacefully in her arms. Marcus and Diego were there too. She'd invited them for dinner, needing the comfort of people who understood what it meant to lose everything and keep going. "So, what's the plan?" Marcus asked, watching Diego color quietly on the floor. "I'm going to start my own company," Victoria said, "a consulting firm that helps organizations implement ethical business practices. We'll show other companies that treating employees well isn't just morally right, it's profitable." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "That's ambitious and risky." "Everything worthwhile is risky," Victoria replied. "But I have advantages, I have capital, connections, and most importantly, I have you." "Me?" "You're going to be my partner," Victoria said. "Equal partners. This isn't charity or guilt money. It's recognition that your expertise in human welfare is exactly what the business world needs." Diego looked up from his coloring. "Dad, does that mean you'll help sick kids again?" Marcus smiled. "Different kind of helping, mijo, but yes, I'll be helping people again." 6 months later, Rivera Manning Consulting occupied a modest office building in Center City, a world away from the glass tower Victoria had once commanded. Their first client was Henderson Manufacturing, the same company Sterling had wanted to gut for profit. Instead of mass layoffs, Victoria and Marcus had implemented a comprehensive restructuring plan. They retrained workers for new positions, negotiated gradual retirements for older employees who wanted them, and created performance incentives that boosted productivity by 30%. The results spoke for themselves. Henderson's employee satisfaction scores were the highest in their industry. Customer complaints had dropped to nearly zero, and productivity had increased so dramatically that they'd become a model for other manufacturers. More importantly, 300 families had kept their livelihoods, their dignity, and their hope for the future. Victoria's phone rang as she reviewed the Henderson quarterly report. The caller ID showed a familiar name, Margaret Hayes. "Victoria, I hope you'll accept my apology," Margaret said without preamble. "I should have supported you when it mattered." "Water under the bridge," Victoria replied. What can I do for you? I'm calling because I want to hire your firm. I've left Manning Financial. Sterling's policies have driven the company into the ground. Stock price is down 40%. They're facing 3 wrongful termination lawsuits, and employee turnover is costing them millions. Victoria smiled. I'll have Marcus call you tomorrow. He specializes in fixing exactly those kinds of problems. After the call, Victoria walked to the window of her new office. It was smaller than her old one, with a view of the street rather than the sky, but it felt honest in a way her penthouse corporate suite never had. Marcus appeared in the doorway, Diego's backpack slung over his shoulder. Ready to go? Diego's piano teacher is expecting us in 20 minutes. Victoria gathered her things, thinking about how much had changed since that day at Union Station. Diego was thriving, excelling in school, making friends, developing into the confident, kind child his father was raising him to be. Marcus had found his purpose again, using his gift for caring about people in a new way, and Emma was growing up in a world where her mother's work actually mattered, where success was measured not just in dollars but in lives improved and dignity preserved. As they walked to Victoria's car, she'd traded the BMW for a modest sedan that better reflected her new priorities. Diego tugged on her sleeve. "Miss Victoria, are you happy now?" Victoria looked at the little boy who had inadvertently changed her life, then at Marcus, who had shown her what real strength looked like, and finally at Emma, sleeping peacefully in her carrier. "Yes, Diego," she said softly, "I'm finally happy." That evening, as Victoria gave Emma her bottle, she thought about the letter she'd received that morning. It was from Dr. Sarah Chen, the former head of pediatrics at Children's Hospital, now working at a clinic that Rivera Manning Consulting had helped design. "Dear Victoria and Marcus, I wanted you to know that our patient satisfaction scores have reached the highest levels in the hospital's history. When you create a workplace where nurses feel valued and supported, it shows in every interaction with patients and families. Yesterday, a mother told me that her daughter's nurse, one of the experienced professionals you helped us retain, had sung her baby to sleep during a difficult procedure. She cared about my child like she was her own," the mother said. "That's what you've given us, the space to care, not just to process patients or meet quotas, but to actually heal people. Thank you for showing us a better way. Dr. Sarah Chen." Victoria smiled, thinking about Marcus's words at the train station all those months ago. She just needed someone to listen. It turned out that wasn't just true for babies. It was true for everyone. Employees needed leaders who listened. Companies needed partners who cared about more than profit. The world needed people willing to choose compassion over convenience. Outside, Philadelphia glittered in the darkness, full of families trying to make ends meet, workers hoping for dignity, children dreaming of futures that seemed just out of reach. Victoria had once looked down on that world from her glass tower, seeing it as something to profit from rather than serve. Now she was part of it, building something that mattered from the ground up. It was harder work than she'd ever imagined, not the clean abstractions of financial modeling, but the messy, complicated business of actually caring about people. But every night, when she tucked Emma into her crib, Victoria knew she was creating something worth inheriting, not just wealth, but wisdom, not just power, but purpose, not just success, but significance. The phone rang softly. Another potential client, another company looking for a better way to treat their employees. Victoria answered with a smile, ready to begin again the work of healing the wounds that greed had created, one organization at a time. In the distance, a train whistle echoed across the city, carrying people home to families who were counting on them, to children who needed them, to lives that mattered more than quarterly earnings or stock prices ever could. And in a modest apartment in South Philadelphia, Marcus Rivera tucked his son into bed, humming the same lullaby he'd sung to a crying baby in Union Station, the song that had changed 2 lives and proven that kindness, not profit, was the real measure of success. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you loved this story, check out the other videos on your screen now. I think you'll really enjoy them. And don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. See you in the next story.